thank you very much for joining us. Please do feel free to ask as many questions as you can. I'm fully aware that all of you will be in a different space in terms of your people management processes and requirements with regards to your businesses. So what I've done is develop something that I hope hits something useful for all of you, but I think the major information sharing and probably knowledge base will come from discussions that occur at the end. They're always when the things that the really interesting juicy things come out, when we can talk about those. So I will go through, and I'll go through not too quickly but at a reasonable pace, and I'm absolutely happy to come back and talk to you at the end with all of this. Okay, so let me just see if this is actually going to work. There we go. So with regards to Advancer, we were established in 2015. I don't know if any of you know Lou, who's quite prominent around River City Labs. I see somebody nodding there. He's the person with whom I share my wonderful life, and I apologise in advance. He's not here, so I've got 2 teenagers and a dog. If they burn the house down or vomit on the carpet, I'm the one who has to deal with it. But we've been around since 2015, started when I left my job as the Executive Director of Workforce and Organisational Development in Queensland Health, in Metro North in particular. We've had a ball giving all sorts of advice to government organisations, small businesses, but we really enjoy working with startups and scale-ups because we find that we can have the most interaction with people there. So we've enjoyed that. We've had a number of clients and partners. I'm sure you're super interested in all of those. I'll just skip through those. So this is me, and Rachel introduced me very wonderfully earlier. Thank you very much, Rachel. I'll skip on through that. So number one thing, I suppose, that has come out, particularly in regards to when people are smaller, and interestingly with the pandemic, which is, why should I bother with HR? It's something that's a nice to have. I need to focus on growing my business, and quite frankly, you know, I've got bigger things to worry about. So I thought I'd just highlight, and I'm sure you all know, that founders, CEOs, GMs are ultimately accountable for their workforce. If people end up in the Workforce Commission, the Fair Work Commission, Industrial Relations Commission, anti-discrimination, etc., it's you guys who are ultimately accountable. At a very basic level, we are looking for compliance with the legislative requirements, including maintenance of records, workplace health and safety. I think there's a lot of information out there that people don't know about with regards to what accountabilities are actually in place, particularly around workplace health and safety. Intermediate level, I suppose, this is around when you start having employees and you want them to do what you want them to do to a standard that you want them to do it to, and what to do if that goes wrong, so managing difficult employees. But then really when you get sophisticated, you're humming and you're planning for the future, and you've got excellent culture. And once you have excellent culture and terrific planning, that's when your teams are operating at their full potential, I suppose. So that's the ultimate aim. So the key objective of today is to essentially understand what the fundamentals are to HR, appropriate to you guys as small business, but more importantly, for you to make the most of the resources that you've got, because I'm fully aware that not all of you have HR departments that you can rely on, and or access even to HR consultants. So what can you do with what you've got to maximize your abilities in there? So first off, if you Google the fundamentals of HR, or even go to various university courses, they all differ. Fundamentals of HR go from just about everything to do with HR. So it's really difficult to pinpoint what fundamentals of HR actually is and what we should talk about today. But what I did was have a chat to Lou, have a chat to Pauline, Rachel, etc. And we came up with 4 areas for you guys today that would be important. The first one is the paperwork. This is the boring stuff. This is the, are you compliant? Do you have a contract? What are your obligations, I suppose, with regards to legislation? Boring, but really, really key, because if you get this wrong, you can end up in a lot of trouble. The second part is around, I've called it clarity in key areas. This is around your people who come on board and you guys understanding exactly what the expectations are and how you're going to move forward. The third one we're going to talk about is performance management. And I'll talk about that a bit later, and then the scaling teams. So what we'll cover in the basics is what do you need to do to protect yourself, minimum requirements and where you can go for help. So I've talked about the clarity and key areas. The performance management one that I want to talk to you about is why it's more than just a process when things go wrong, how you can actually set yourself up at the beginning to get the best out of your teams. And then the scaling teams one, which I believe will be quite important for some of you, maybe not now, but maybe later, which is when to make a new hire, how you go about it, and who you might want to hire, and then finally how to make everyone gel and work really well. So does that make sense for everybody? I don't need just nodding, thumbs up, etc. So the first one, the essential versus optional. So in Australia, there are 10 minimum national employment standards. Hopefully you're all fully aware of these 10 minimum standards. These are the things that all employees have to have. You can't get away from this. There's a maximum weekly hours, for example, which is 38 hours for a full-time employee. People have to be able to request for flexible working arrangements, parental leave, annual leave, all of those 10 employment standards there. Now, those don't necessarily need to be included in an employment contract because they sit there anyway, but you must be aware of them. And I'll get to what you can do to address some of these just in the next slide. Now, with regards to contracts.
Ceri, just a question
yes.
on that, because I'm curious about this, the maximum weekly hours.
Yes.
I have noticed that the JobKeeper talks about hours of 80 hours per fortnight. And it doesn't really match this standard that I thought we had.
Yeah.
So I'm curious about that.
So I think to be honest with you, there are, different awards and industrial agreements also have 36.25, for example, if you're in the government, crazy. Some go up to 40. There has been confusion around the JobKeeper and the flexible working arrangements. Essentially, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week is 40 hours. Essentially, 38 hours is the one that's in the Fair Work Act. I have to admit that's not my actual area of expertise. What I have actually done, and it's super funny that you brought it up. I was hoping that nobody would. Funny that you brought it up because yesterday I've got a lawyer who works with me, an industrial relations lawyer, and I asked her exactly that. Question. And the reason that it's suddenly going to become very important is because of all these changes in the Fair Work, in the JobKeeper, and you're going to have to prove this next level more so than you ever had to prove the last lot. People are going to have to be keeping timesheets, etc. And my question to her is, what's the impact of this? So I will get back to you on that if we can park that one, because that's not my area. But thank you for bringing I'm funny that I had it yesterday. With regards to contracts, I think not many people, it's interesting the amount of people who I meet who say, well, we don't have contracts. And that's not necessarily catastrophic. You can have a verbal contract. I would always recommend that it's a written contract. The reason for that is that then everybody's aware of what the requirements are. Everyone's aware of the terms and conditions of employment. But the other really important piece of contracts with regards to startups and particular scale-ups, when you might have intellectual property, etc., is that contracts can be used as, I guess, evidential support if you ever need to bring anything against an employer. I know this sounds very negative, but with regards to confidentiality and restraint of trade, etc., if you have that verbally, it's very difficult to prove anything if somebody takes your product and disappears off with it. If it's in a contract, you've got that one level of assistance there. If you don't have a contract in place and you want to put a contract in place, it's really very important. This is one takeaway, if this applies to you, that you write the contract that reflects the current working arrangements of your employees. If you try and change the working arrangements of employees with a contract, they, I guess, can reject it. And if this occurs, then, and you coerce them or put them under duress to sign a new contract, then they can take you to the Fair Work Commission. So just as a little note, if you don't have a written contract in place and you want to get one in place, have a chat to somebody maybe to help you draft the contract, or certainly don't change any terms and conditions of employment for your employees. The other important bits about contracts are getting the awards right, particularly with regards to payroll. We've had a lot of stuff going down in Australia at the moment with regards to wage theft, they're calling it, in inverted commas. And invariably that's people not understanding the awards or industrial agreements that they're under. For example, I had a very small business who came to me and said, we want to put our staff onto casual employment. That's absolutely fine. We want to only provide them with 1 hour and 15 minutes per day. Not fine, because in their award, they had a minimum of 2 hours work per day or per shift that they were allowed to come into. So if they had gone ahead and paid that 1 hour and a quarter or 1 hour and a half, can't remember exactly what it was, and their employees had taken them and been to Fair Work Commission, that employer would have been accused of payroll theft, I suppose, or certainly would have lost their case. So making sure you've got those awards and you know what award you're under is going to be really key. And of course, superannuation, actually paying superannuation. I know that can fall off the radar for a lot of individuals, and that's very important. And with regards to the essentials as well, just going on to the workplace health and safety, a number of years ago, they brought in a new Workplace Health and Safety Act, and that put a lot of onus on, it's called a person in control of a business or undertaking, a PCBU. They are not only, we all know about work cover claims and having our work cover insurance, but the PCBUs, which are founders, owners, executives, I suppose, of workplaces, are responsible for all of those things that you see in front of you: the provision and maintenance of a work environment without safe, provision and maintenance of safe plant and structures, etc., etc. Some of those are very obvious and you will have those in place, but the key piece for workplace health and safety as well is not just having these things in place, but being able to show that you've got them in place and to show that you've trained your staff in them and you've got records of training and that they understand. So for example, harassment and discrimination falls in under the Workplace Health and Safety Act. So if you turn around and say, yes, we've got a harassment and discrimination policy, do any of your employees know about it? Oh, well, it's up on the website. That might not meet the standard for the workplace health and safety. They need to be trained in it. They need to understand it and keep records of it. The workplace health and safety, I suppose, is quite key. And bear in mind, this is as far as is reasonably practicable. So you're not going to be expected to outlay, you know, half of your operating budget making somewhere safe for something or better for someone if it's not going to be reasonably practicable, but you're going to have to take risk assessments. We can talk about all of these if any of these apply to you. I shan't labour the point. The paperwork that I would consider essential to protect yourselves against, if you've got staff as you move up, are things like your code of conduct, so your expectations of behaviour in the workplace, your workplace health and safety policy that we just mentioned there, including a return to work programme or process for anybody who might get sick. A leave policy that is in one of the 10, not the policy, but the provision is in one of the 10 NES areas. So what do you do with regards to leave policy? How do people apply for it? When can you say no? When can you direct somebody on leave? Harassment, discrimination, we've mentioned. Increasingly digital and social media, people are finding themselves coming a little bit of a cropper with people commenting on social media and bringing their business potentially into disrepute or put their person or their brand, and certainly performance management frameworks. So those are the essentials. Best practice, of course, people want employee security, transparent recruitment and recruitment and selection practices, you know, succession planning. These are all really at the stage that you can do quite simply, actually, and you don't have to do them yourselves. There's plenty of information out there, but these, I believe, are when you start getting to those bigger, I call them magnet businesses, you know, businesses people want to join. They tend to want to join them because they've got great employee satisfaction, great succession planning, great you know, leadership and things like that. So those are the sorts of things that you move as you progress through your journey, you move into doing those sorts of things. Okay, I'm going to move on now to clarity and key areas. Everybody happy with that? This is around basically the biggest issue that I've found with regards to clarity, particularly in startups and scale-ups, is around the ability of the founder, and I'm going to say this very carefully, and my husband is included in this, the founder letting go of their baby. So when it becomes more than just you or you and your partner and you have to employ somebody, actually letting that bit of information or get that bit of the job go, and making sure that that person completely is aware of what is expected of them. What humans discovered as they evolved is that we work better as a team rather than being on our own. We survive if we're in a team. That's pretty self-explanatory. But what individuals of that team need to enable them to perform at their best is to feel that they belong and add value to a team, and that they know what they're doing. So the best example I can give you of this in a sporting example is a goalie in a soccer team. They know exactly what it is that they need to do. The difficulty comes with the goalie when they confuse themselves with a back line, and they all get jumbled up, and the goalie's not really doing the job that they were hired to do. They're doing the job of the back line, they've pushed up, and then a goal gets let in. So this is the same, I suppose, in a working environment. Everybody needs to understand exactly what their role is. Then they know how they add value. If somebody is included in a group, then they feel very satisfied. If someone's excluded from a group, then actually the pain receptors, the receptors in the brain that activate when you feel pain, align when you're left out of a group. So having a group that have very clear about what role they play will enable those endorphins to kick in. They're doing really well as a team. So they know what role they're playing in comparison to others. They understand the rules under which they operate, and the whole team aligns to a common goal. So that's invariably lots of organizations, the founders and the executive might know what the organizational goal is and have articulated that, but those underneath them might not be necessarily clear how they add value to that goal. So having a bit of an organizational business objective, or okay, sorry, I've got a file stream, go away. Business objective or common behavioral values, having these things that you work with your team in place so that everybody's very clear, everybody understands exactly what's expected and how they operate, will be the fundamental first step in gaining everybody's ability to operate to the best of their ability. So they are then, there's no arguments about who should be doing what, no arguments over whose accountability is what. They all understand the rules with which they operate, and they're held to account when they don't operate in those rules. And you can actually set that up very easily, and I'm happy to walk anybody through how you might do that in sort of a couple of hours with a small team, or even an hour with a small team. And we can walk through all those sorts of things. I'm conscious of the time, so I'm moving forward, and I can't hit go. There we go. Hang on, it's not moving. So performance management. Okay, so this is the performance management's I often get phone calls from people when it's really hit the fan with performance management. Invariably, somebody is right at the end of their tether and they just want somebody out of the door. And that's fine, except for the fact that the Fair Work Commission have got a very clear process that you need to follow with regards to performance management. So I'm going to talk about two things here. One is why putting the fundamentals in place to get good performance management is key. And the second is what to do when it goes wrong. So as an individual, we're all inherently, we're competitive, we like to get things done, which is why things like KPIs, KRAs, etc. work really well for humans and teams, individuals and teams. I know people who are very competitive and focused, and they love when they write lists, and they write lists and they include things that they've already done so they can tick off the list of things that they've done, right? I'm not like that, but I have a number of people who I work with who are, and I love working with them because they complement me so well. But basically, status, recognition, achievement all drives our motivation and satisfaction. So if we can have a great performance management platform in place, it doesn't have to be complex, then individuals in the team will see that they're succeeding, they'll see that they're winning and achieving, and that will in turn make their performance higher, if that makes sense. So this is why it's important that the individual goals align with the organisational goals, and feedback, if they're not hitting those organisational goals, comes in a timely manner, relevant, and you've got the right information in place that can actually do something about it. So when we're talking about this, I suppose, there used to be a whole school of thought, I guess, that you had an annual performance review, and people still do have annual performance reviews. But what the science is now suggesting is that both the employer and the employee are getting so stressed with the thought of having an annual performance review that they that their performance actually declines. It doesn't quite align with that typical sort of, yep, you have your performance review, all your remuneration is going to be reliant on this performance review outcome. Let's go. The performance declines prior to the performance review, everybody gets nervous, and then they come out and it's not really timely, so it's based on a year's worth of information, so there's no real learning from it for individuals. So what the new way of doing this is saying is that you're having regular team meetings, regular performance catch-ups, where you can use up-to-date information to provide relevant and appropriate feedback for people to then improve. One of the processes, one of the big things that people go wrong with processes, so what if it's not working out, is that they delay the conversations. Now, Australians, there's a study done by, it used to be Telstra, I can't remember what it was called prior, I can send the information to Rachel, where it talked about what various nationalities consider to be quality, and Australians consider their relationships to be of something of quality. So Italians think it's beauty, Germans think it's efficiency, Americans think it's about being big, Australians value their relationships as being quality, which means that we're really bad at providing feedback to people because we don't want to damage our relationships. So the biggest issue that comes with regards to performance management when things go wrong is that people delay having these hard conversations because they just don't want to. So having the tough conversations is talking about, so not delaying and having those tough conversations means that people don't continue on for ages, and then it comes as a shock when they are told that they're not performing. With regards to the tough conversations, you have to tell them where they're lacking, give them an opportunity to improve, and have statistics and standards which actually outline what the expectations are. So you're not performing this sales well, you're hitting 10%, we want you to hit 15%, you've got 3 weeks to do it, we're going to meet every week in between while this is happening. Do you agree? So you're agreeing to goals and you're coming in and you're following through, you're outlining how these things are measured, and you're onto this. Because if you're not onto this, then this is when the last little bit's going to go really wrong. You've got to have these things documented. This is another area that people fall down. They say, yes, I've had the conversations, but no, there's no documentation. So they may have got onto it, they may have had a tough conversation, they may have even followed through, but if there's nothing there that can sit there and be said, this is what we agreed, and this is where you went wrong again, and so as a result of this, we're going to terminate your employment, for example. If those 4 steps aren't followed, then you're likely to get yourself into a bit of trouble if you have an unfair dismissal case brought against you. Now, there was one thing that I did want to, and I'm so conscious of time, one thing that I did want to talk to you about, which was really encouraging that occurred maybe this time last month, is that there was an unfair dismissal brought to the Fair Work Commission where somebody had been performance managed, and they said that they had been bullied through this process of performance management. And that, I think, is a real fear for employers. They're sitting there going, I'm going to be accused of bullying. This case, because they had done all of this and they could demonstrate everything, they didn't delay, they had the conversations, they gave the very achievable goals, they gave them opportunities to improve, they documented, they followed through. The case was upheld, the dismissal was upheld, and the person who was accused of person who accused them of bullying remained terminated. Their employment remained terminated. So that was a really great case for performance management, I believe, because I think that there are a lot of them that fall over with regards, and people are trying just about anything if they are terminated to get back employed. So that was, I'm happy to send also, Rachel, that case summary, so you can have a bit of a look at what the employer did with regards to performance management. It's great to just have in your locker, you know, for if you ever have to do it. Hopefully none of you do. I'm moving on to the last little bit, which is workplace culture. This is my favorite bit. This is what I do when I do my HR. I do enjoy doing all of that, but I do scaling teams is my fave. So the big thing when I talk to founders, and particularly a basis on Lou in particular, actually, is when did he decide that he wanted to scale teams? Who did he choose and how did he do it? The when came for him, and I don't know whether it's the same, some of you I can see on the video, but the when for him came when he started losing sleep and realized that somebody was going to be able to do this a whole lot better than him. And he was being caught up doing things that were sucking his energy so badly that he couldn't focus on the things that he was good at. So Lou is great at certain things, not so great at others. So he needed to find somebody who could balance him out. And I'll talk to you about the who in a tick. How did he do it? He went to, it didn't go on Seek, he went to his networks and tried to find somebody, and that worked exceptionally well for him. I think we're afraid sometimes of using our networks. We sort of go, oh no, we don't want to be a burden for people. But in actual fact, the use of networks, particularly this River City Labs network that you've got, is U-Butte in terms of finding staff. People will tell you the truth. They will give you the warts and all outcomes for individuals with regards to what you want. The one thing that I do also when we're talking about the who, it's not really the who as an individual, but it's when you're growing your team, please consider the future when you're growing your team. And I'm talking about this in terms of an industrial future. So what I'm saying is, if you're the CEO and you need a technical person or a finance person, consider if in the first instance, you really genuinely need a CFO or a CTO. And I'll tell you why, because CFOs and CTOs usually are super expensive and they've got a prerequisite skill set that requires a lot of, they get paid a lot in the big areas. And if you are then growing, if you then grow in the future and you establish that actually this person that you've hired as a CTO isn't probably as senior as you need, and you need a real CTO, and you've already got a CTO, you're going to have to make that person redundant. And you're not, the redundancy means that the position has to go, not the person. So really consider when you're scaling, do you just need a technology person, not a CTO, or a finance person, not a CFO, or a people and culture person, not a chief HR officer? It's just, I understand the temptation to have the C-suite sitting on top of a scaling business, but it can really lead you into some problems further down the track. And I'm happy to discuss those with you when we're talking about them. That's just my little takeaway from that. So for scaling teams, has anyone heard of Belbin before? No? I love Belbin. Belbin is a British company. I love them because when you're dealing with individuals and you're asking people to answer surveys to find out where in a box they fit, this has got a whole array of behaviors. It's behavior based rather than psychologically psychologically profiling people, behavior can change and behavior can adapt into your environment. So while somebody might go through this Belbin and find that they are one, or you're not ever one, but you're a number of particular behaviors, they will be perfect for particular points in time, and you can then shift people and individuals and work to their strengths and weaknesses. We've had a lot of fun in this in terms of high performance teams, and finding where, for example, if they've recruited without really fully understanding the requirements of a team, then they can have areas completely missed. So for example, if you can see the as project progressed, different team role are required bits on that slide, you can see that the different behavior, and I won't go through all the different behavior types because that in itself is a good hour of fun and games with people, but you can see how you need different individuals. So I spoke to you before about Lou and understanding when he needed to hire somebody else. Lou is a shaper and a resource investigator and I can't remember his third one, but anyway, he was great at the ideas and you know, getting people on board. He's your relationship guy. He needed somebody who was going to follow through on every great idea that he had, because he is the type, he'll kill me for that. I'm the type of person as well who I like shiny things, new things, and then when it gets to the nitty gritty of stuff, I lose interest very quickly. So I always found myself working very, very well with somebody who could do that nitty gritty stuff and really got energy from doing the nitty gritty stuff. So the beauty of Belbin is that it highlights to you the type of behaviors that you can look for in a potential candidate and shape your recruitment questions around a behavior-based recruitment process rather than necessarily just a task-based recruitment process. So you can make sure that you fit everybody in. You can get onto the Belbin site and I'll send you the links, and you can read through all of these team roles, and I bet you'll come up and you'll go, oh my God, that's me. Oh my God, that's my partner. Oh my God, that's our salesperson. And you'll be able to sit there and go, I now understand why we can't get X, Y, or Z done. It's because we don't have another person that might be missing from your team. We had, I had an opportunity, a great opportunity with an engineering firm, and they couldn't understand why they weren't selling they had a great product and it kept being refined and refined and refined, getting better and better and better, but it was never being sold. And the reason was they had a whole load of completer finishers, implementers, plants, you know, thinking up all these ideas, and they kept getting better and better. Nobody wanted to sign off on a finished product because it kept getting better and better. And they didn't have anybody in their team who could go out and network and actually sell the product. As soon as they got somebody in there to network and sell the product, and somebody in there to say, we're done, we're going out as an MVP, they flew. They just needed that circuit breaker in there. It was fascinating to see. It was great. So that's a lot of fun. And you can do this by yourself, or you can phone me and I'll give you a hand through it, but it's fun. So with regards to scaling teams then, just having some things, this is my last slide and then we can chat. We've talked a little bit about understanding self and others, which is that top sort of right. That's the Belbin stuff. If you get that right, moving into your purpose and alignment, getting your roles in place, getting your organizational goals and your role descriptions all in place, opening up the pathways to have communication in an open, honest, we didn't really cover that, but an open, honest environment that you know, encourages creative thinking, provides a great area. If you fail, then that's fine. We get up and we go again. Winning and learning, which is your accountabilities, your performance management, your KPIs, and the accountability, which is the difficult conversations. That's when great team culture occurs. I find that if any one of these is missing, then trust erodes from people. If you don't hold your other staff to account, or if you let something go and it becomes the way we do things around here that's just accepted, that's when your team culture will potentially decline. So it's not as easy as it looks to keep the culture going. I 100% get that, particularly when you're focused on, you know, getting your product out there and selling yourselves, I completely understand how this can be challenging. But actually there are ways that you can build it into weekly team meetings, just chunks at a time, that will actually get you firing really, really well with regards to team culture. So with regards to the what's out there, is the Fair Work Commission website has an awful lot of stuff on it. It's got templates on there, it's got draft policies on there that you can adapt if you need to do some of those things that we talked about at the beginning. We've got an audit that we do on the website that can talk about the quality of contracts. We send them out to the lawyer. Quality of contracts, the quality of your policies that are up at the moment. You know, what planning have you got? What workplace health and safety have you got? I mentioned Belbin to check on there, to have a bit of a look through. It really is worthwhile. It's a lovely, they give out an awful lot of information for free, and it's very, very cheap to do it if you want to do it as your team. But if you have any other questions, then we're obviously here to help. And those are my contact details. So I'm really keen. We've been going for sort of 40 minutes and I feel like I need a break, and I'm probably a bit monosyllabic. But keen to answer any of your questions. Did I go over things too quickly? Did I not make sense? Let me know.
Guys, feel free to ask any questions, unmute yourself or pop in the chat box if you prefer.
Hi, Ceri.
Yes, Ceri.
Ceri, yes, Ceri. Sorry.
That's all right.
I came a little bit late. What's the difference between what you have just shared with the Personality Plus? Because I find that when I using like recruiting the team members, I just use the Personality Plus as the profile, and then to differentiate what they like and what they're good at. And then that's a very easy way for me to identify salesperson and project person, and also the team leaders.
Yeah. So that's absolutely, and I'm not taking anything away from the psychological profiling at all. Belbin is a behavior profile. So when you actually go through this with Belbin, you answer it as how you would behave in a workplace. And then what actually happens is that you send it off to your peers, and they answer how they see you in a workplace. So someone might see you as a real specialist in your field, but you don't see yourself as a specialist in your field, for example. So it's about how you present. And the beauty about behavior is that it can change and it can be observed, rather than a psychological profile, which is, you know, you're a color, as you said, or you're in a quadrant or whatever. So I like Belbin because instead of being put in a box, you can adapt. And Belbin has, we didn't go into it in too much detail, but I love it because it has preferences, acceptable roles that you can perform, and then least preferred. And you find that if you'll be a spectrum across all of those 9 profiles. So if somebody comes up as a preferred profile, then they're going to get energy from doing that work. If they're sitting in their middle profile, then they can do it, absolutely, but they can probably only do it for a little bit of time before they get a bit bored of it. And the bottom profile should be avoided if at all possible. Now, obviously, you might have to do some of that, but it really is up to you. I wouldn't suggest that you stop doing what you're doing if it works for you. This is just an option for people who can read through and have a bit of a look and see if it works for them. You can do the process. It's cheaper than a psychological profile. And as I said, behavior and the way you operate in the workplace changes depending on what job you're doing. So whereas a psychological profile, you're unlikely to change your profile. You're likely to be in one spot and that's where you'll be. Behavior is fluid and it's changeable and it's observable. So people can really give you feedback and work through it. Does that make sense? Sorry, I can't hear you.
Wendy, you're still on mute.
Okay, thank you. Okay, got it. Thank you, Ceri. So then in that case, as a startup, and in what format you will be able to assist them, and at what point we should consider engage you guys?
Well, it sort of depends. We've worked with, I mean, Belbin's gone through the Australian Defence Force and Coca-Cola Amateur. I mean, it can go up to huge levels. Really, a team that we would be working with is probably, you wouldn't want more than about 7 people in a team, because that's, you know, well, you can, but we have done, and they've had multiple teams and we've split it up. But you can, what they actually ask you to do is, in a team role, once you get past 10, it gets a bit unwieldy. So it sort of depends how many people you have and how your workforce is split up. Because if you've got, for example, a engineering area and a sales area, then they might have completely different jobs that they need to do. So there'd be different requirements. So we might have to set them up a bit differently. But if you've got one big team trying to sort of battle it out, then that's different as well. You can do this for, you know, 4 or more. You can go down to the number 4. To give you an idea, each person's, to do Belbin, for each person's profile, it costs about $90. And in that they get their self-perception and 6 peers to review it. So you get your personal report, what you think you are, and then once it's combined with your peers, so you can get a really 360 review of what your strengths and potential, you know, possible weaknesses are, or allowable weaknesses, they call it. Don't be surprised if.
Perfect. Do we have any other questions?
No one asking, I'm asking. Ceri, have you ever heard a guy called Rogers Hamilton?
George Hamilton?
Yes.
No, I haven't.
Okay, he has done something very similar to yours, but to a different entrepreneur, and he has created a different profile. And then after you did that, and he produced an extensive report with your personality, your wealth creation, they call it some wealth dynamic. So in that, and he done massive job in that area. I find that it's quite fascinating. In one event, he could have like 2,000 or 3,000 people in a live event, and he will share his the profile. And then, you know, in the process, like 2,000 or 3,000 people will go through the whole dynamic and then come up a wealth creation profile. So it's rather interesting. Yeah, that's probably, if you like, that's some suggestion I would give to you, is to have a look into his name and have a look into what he has done, and for him to do the customer attraction and the conversion at no time. Yeah.
Cool. I've written his name down. Thank you.
If there is no other questions, I think the best thing is to thank everyone for coming to today, and thank you so much, Ceri. It was, I mean, for me, I found it very valuable, so I'm sure everyone else did. Yeah, Marie's got
my number. Give me a call if you've got any weird and wonderful questions that you want offline. That's not a problem.
Perfect. And guys, anyone on the call today, we will be sharing this pack and the links to the resources and documents Ceri mentioned throughout later this week or early next week. So you'll be able to refer back to, and then I'm sure you'll see her in the labs at some point when things are opened up a bit more.
Thanks, Ceri.
Excellent. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Lovely to see you all.